Welcome along to the Age Group Multisport podcast with me, Richard Conway. This is a platform for age group athletes to share their stories. So welcome back to AMP, and thank you once again for taking your time out to give us a listen. If you like what you hear, please do spread the word and share the name of this podcast around to like-minded people. That will be much appreciated. And on this episode, the longest episode that we've ever recorded, we have the pleasure to speak to Mike Jubb. Mike is currently head of events at ATW, the Active Training World Events Company, and he shares his journey from orienteering as a young man right up to current day. So I hope you enjoy his story. Like I said, it's a long one, but it's really worth a listen in my opinion. So yeah, we're going to get straight into it and we shall see you on the other side. Nice to meet you. Thank you for taking your time out and agreeing to share your story.
Yeah, no.
And the journey continues with ATW.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's been sort of a bit of a roundabout journey, which probably never would have guessed I'd have got here, to where I am today from sort of like years ago. There you go.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing all about it. If you'd just like to introduce yourself and a bit about your background, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Mike Jubb. Many of you may have seen me at ATW events, or you may have seen me competing in years gone by. And yeah, I guess I'm a triathlete. Yeah, but I guess sort of like going back to the start, sort of how a lot of people say, how do you get into sport and things? So my sort of background is that if I go right back to when I was a teenager, basically my parents never did anything with sport. I was never brought up in like a sporty family or anything like that. So my parents weren't interested in sport as far as they were concerned. The only thing that mattered was education and getting a job, basically, and like that was the focus. And I, on the other hand, was really, really into my sport. Sort of thing. I really wanted to be good at sport. I was that kid at school who wanted to be really good at sport, but was absolutely terrible. So I was in all of the teams. So I was in the rugby team, the football team, etc. But basically, I'd turn up every weekend because they knew I'd turn up. So they put me in the team, and I'd sit on the subs bench, basically, and they'd put me on for the last 2 minutes of the game just to say that I got a game, sort of thing. But they didn't really want to play me because I was really bad. But that was basically my sort of like background in sport. And so when I was at school, and then had sort of teenage years sort of thing, about 16, something like that, about 14, 15 maybe, sort of having a bit of a rough time at home with the parents sort of thing, lots of arguing and that kind of stuff and going on, as I guess all sort of like teenage boys tend to do. And one day my sister, she used to get a lift to work with somebody. And she basically got in the car on a Monday morning and went, oh, God, sort of thing. It's been sick to death of my brother sort of thing. He's always arguing with my parents at home. And this guy basically was an Orienteer. And he basically said, how do you fancy having to go at orienteering? And she was like, well, what's that? She goes, oh, you get to go out and you get to go running around forests and that kind of stuff, sort of finding controls. And she said, oh, I'll ask him, see if he wants to do it, anything to get him out of the house. So she came home and said, oh, this guy, sort of like Tony, he's offered to take you orienteering next week if you want to go. I was like, yeah, great, sort of thing. It's a sport I've never done before. It sounds really exciting. So I went. This guy turned up on Sunday morning, sort of thing, and he's beat up old, Peugeot estate car, sort of thing, outside the house. I mean, you never do it these days, would you? Sort of thing. Some old bloke pulls up out your house, and a 14-year-old kid goes and jumps in the car with them, and off we went. But basically, this guy took me orienteering in Leicestershire. I think it was Burbage Hill we went to, and I absolutely fell in love with the sport. The idea of having this total freedom, from being a teenager where you're sort of told, don't do this, go here, go there, to suddenly turn up and do a sport where someone gives you a map and goes, there you go. In the next, you just got to find your way around this route and it's entirely up to you where you go and what you do. And we'll see you at the finish line.
Yeah.
And
liberating.
It was great. I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. Sort of fell in love with the sport, from an early, right from the first event. And basically spent the next probably sort of like 5 years, certainly through my university, sort of like orienteering and sort of like training for orienteering, and getting reasonably good at it, sort of thing, competitively, and sort of like compete amongst all my orienteering friends. I was like the headless chicken sort of thing, running around fast and fast, trying to find the controls as they take the sort of slow and steady route sort of thing, and probably beat me overall. But I was sort of the energetic, enthusiastic one.
And is just for those who are not familiar with orienteering, what exactly do you have to do? I know you've got to get from A to B. Is it running, or like you just said about walking? And how do you train for it? I guess that's the.
Okay, so basically, imagine a cross country course where you turn up to the start line and they haven't bothered marking the course.
Right.
So basically, you turn up to a start line and you get given a map.
Yeah.
And on this map are the points where you have to get to. And back in the day, you used to get given a piece of a card with squares on it, with numbered squares. And at each control that you get to, there'll be a little flag in the ground, an orange and white flag. And you had what was called a punch. And basically, you'd punch your card to prove that you'd been to that control. And it had a different pattern. Each punch was a different pattern. Okay. So when you get to the finish line, you should have 20 or whatever punches in your card in the correct order with the right patterns to prove you've been to the various points. And it was timed, so it was competitive. A lot of people assume that orienteering is like this thing that the scouts do, where you sort of wander around in a group, and it can be that. But I've got a choice of how I get to that hill. I can either go round on a path that's going to take me 1 kilometre out of the way, or I could just go straight through this block of forest with no paths whatsoever. Yeah. So you end up running through sort of knee-high brambles, nettles, thorn bushes. I mean, you come back from an event and you look like you've been torn to shreds, sort of thing at times, because you literally just run straight through the terrain and through the forest. You choose your route. Yeah. And I think that was one of the things I really liked about it, was that concept of sort of consequences. It's like you choose your route. You can't blame anyone else. The number of times you go to races and people moan and bitch about sort of like, oh God, the course, someone sent me the wrong way, or, they miscounted the laps, or I didn't count my laps, or whatever, And it's like, well, when you're orienteering, there is no one to do that for you. It's just you and the map. You know where you've got to get to, and it's your choice. And if you end up waist high in a marsh, which has happened to me before, so I think in these races, well, that's your fault. You chose to go that way. You read the map. You should have read the map and not gone that way. Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic sport.
And what distances were there, Mike?
Well, the distances vary. Obviously, I started like a 14-year-old, and you'd be doing sort of 4 kilometre sort of distances, that kind of thing. Generally speaking, you used to be able to sort of almost convert your kilometres. If you multiply by 10, roughly, that was sort of the length of time it would take you. If you're doing 10 minutes per kilometre, because the distances they measure are the straight line route between the controls, and you never go on the straight line route. You'll never go in a direct line. You'll always go round, or end up going round and round in circles trying to find the control or whatever. So, yeah, you can normally take, roughly about 10 minutes per kilometre when you're sort of competing to sort of like go round. Yeah. Having said that, the longest event I ever did was in my 20s. I went back after a bit of a break from orienteering, and I had to go I went to the British Championships just as a one-off event. And it was a 22-kilometre course around Sherwood Forest at the British Elite Champs. And it was literally flat out the whole time, because you were running on paths. It was, Sherwood Forest. If you've ever raced at Clumber Park or somewhere like that, you know what it's like. Yeah. Beautiful running surfaces through the pine forest. And so you could go at sort of, 3-minute Ks, sort of like through the forest. And it was, that was a totally different sort of challenge. Navigationally not difficult whatsoever, but it was a different sort of challenge because you were running so fast. Your brain was really struggling to be able to navigate even in a simple piece of terrain, because you were, almost running it flat out the whole way. Yeah, one of the things that, orienteering's developed quite a bit since I was doing it back in the 80s and 90s. Nowadays, it's a lot of electronic stuff. So instead of having a card, you have a little chip that attaches to your finger, and you basically get to a little box in the woods sort of thing. So you have the control there, but instead of punching it, you just sort of wave your chip next to the box, and it records your time. And as well as that, it also records if you're using a GPS watch, which most people do these days, it records where you go. So what's quite interesting is because in an orienteering event, it's a bit like a time trial. You basically set off at like minute intervals. So the idea is, in theory, you can't follow anyone in the forest when you're going round. It's literally you and the map. And then afterwards, you can see how you got on. And in the good old days, the only way you could really compare yourself to other people was your total time. And if you bothered to take splits on the way round on your watch, you could sort of compare your split times to other people's split times that you had. Whereas nowadays with GPS watches, you actually track your route the whole way round, and people download their routes to a piece of software. And then you can actually look in real time as though you'd all started at the same time. And you can watch a load of dots running around the map as though you're actually running in against each other in real time. And that's actually really interesting.
Yeah, I bet that's cool.
You went wrong.
Yeah, I bet that looks really cool.
Well, you can sort of see that, oh, God, I didn't realise I was actually 2 minutes ahead at that point. Sort of thing. I was massively in the lead, and then I made that mistake, and now I've ended up at the back of the pack, and, all sort of virtual,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How things have moved on.
Yeah, indeed.
So where did you go from orienteering then? What was the next?
So orienteering, like I said, I did through my university days, and then I got a little bit disheartened with orienteering. It's like with a lot of things, sort of thing. When you start doing something, you love it, absolutely love it for the pure enjoyment of doing the sport. And as you get better at it and get more competitive at it, your focus changes and the reason why you're doing it. And through my sort of university days, in my second and third year at university, I was focused on trying to qualify to go to the World Championships to represent Great Britain. And rather than just doing it for the love of doing it, I started doing it to be competitive. And one of the things, a bit like with triathlon, I guess, sort of thing, the selection procedures that you have in place, even more so like with triathlon, where it's not just a straightforward first 2 or 3 across the line. There's always that sort of nuance of, but they got a puncture or, something happened to them in the swim. With something like orienteering, there's so many things that can go on within a race where someone says, yeah, that guy won that race, but actually navigationally, that was a really simple race. So therefore, we're not going to select them to take them to a very technical area in Finland, say, where there's no paths, because they'll get lost.
Yeah.
So although they have selection races in place, there's a lot of subjectivity that goes on in the selection process. And also you can have, unlike, say, triathlon or running, where you tend to find the same people win every race, because of the navigational element associated with it, you can win one race and then come 30th in the next race, sort of thing. There's a lot of variation that goes on.
Yeah. And
so I sort of got really frustrated with that, because I was sort of one of those people who was quite up and down. So I was sort of thinking, oh God, yeah, I'm definitely in for selection here for the World Juniors. I'm going to get there, and then got the phone call to say, oh no, sorry, we're not taking you. So having been in what I thought was a dead-on cert to be selected to go and represent Great Britain, sort of thing, I found that, oh, actually, no, you're not, sort of thing. So I did get to represent England at some home international type level, but didn't get my chance to go to a World Championships, and that sort of totally frustrated me. I sort of fell out of love with the sport as a result. And that coincided with me finishing university and starting, I guess, my career, if you like, the normal sort of bog standard career, if you like, of a 9-to-5 job. And I went to go to work in Derby at Rolls-Royce in Derby as an accountant, a trainee accountant, and did that typical thing. So I guess sort of following what the family sort of would have expected of me, of just getting a job and getting a career and, earning money, I guess. And at the time, I joined the local athletics club, so it was Derby and County Athletics Club, and just sort of used to turn up with them and sort of just do cross country races in winter, and sort of got into that sort of club running scene at a fairly club level, I would say, sort of thing. I was sort of an average club runner, sort of thing, an okay club runner, sort of thing. Running probably 32, 33 minutes for 10K, that kind of standard, sort of thing. Nothing exceptional really whatsoever, but just sort of a good club standard. And I did that for a few years until I was competing alongside people who were good 800, 1500 meter runners on the track. And, the focus of the club, although I trained with them every week, the focus of the club come track season was always on, sort of like, the 800 guys, the 1500 meter guys and the track. And I was sort of one of those people, yet again, going back to my school days, was sort of held in reserve a bit. It's like, well, you're not really that fast. I'd come from this orienteering background where I was strong, but not really fast. And so I'd sort of was one of those people who they'd sort of go, well, okay, we're short this week. We'll stick you in the B squad or whatever sort of thing, and you can run a 1500, knowing full well I didn't really have that finishing kick or that speed that was required to really do well. And then one week someone went, have you ever had a go at steeplechase? And I was like, no, not really, sort of thing. Never really fancied hurdling, never really had a go at the hurdling aspect of it. So somebody sort of took me to the side and sort of like tried to teach me how to do it and have a go at steeplechasing. And what I found was that the strength that I developed from orienteering and fell running and that kind of stuff I used to do meant that when I was steeplechasing, I actually was as fast in the last 2 laps on the race as I was at the start. Whereas everyone else, if you ever watch steeplechase at the Olympics or anything, they're literally dying in the last couple of laps, sort of thing. And whereas I was like, I don't really see what the problem is. I seem to be quite strong, sort of thing. And my problem is keeping up to begin with.
Yeah.
So inevitably what would happen in a lot of these races was that I'd start off and end up at the back of the pack, sort of hanging on a bit, and then sort of come through the field as everybody started to struggle in the sort of like in the last third of the race, and actually came through and did okay.
Yeah.
And that sort of like, it's one of them things, I think, with athletics and probably with triathlon as well. Once you start to get confident at something and you find something you're fairly good at, all of a sudden you find that, oh, actually, now I'm running faster over 8 and 1500 meters and cross country and road running and everything else because I'm now believing in myself a bit more. And instead of being just another club runner who would sort of fill the slots, now all of a sudden I'm putting myself in a position where actually I'm trying to win titles here, and I'm trying to win a county title or a national, a North of England title, or sort of now I'm sort of representing the club, not as the reserve, but now I'm the person who's sort of like leading the team almost as like the team captain. I'm looking to post the fastest time, and I'm wanting to win things, and it totally changes your mentality, I think.
Yeah. So how did that develop then? What did you achieve with your steeplechase?
So my steeplechasing went really well in 1997. I sort of represented England at in a home international race, one of these races they have down at Loughborough, where it's sort of the top university students versus the home internationals. And I clocked went to the British Champs, made the finals of like the British Championships and things, and clocked an 850 for the steeplechase. So I was aiming one year, that was the year where I said, if I could get down to 8:45, I could be in with a shout of going to the Commonwealth Games and sort of like, representing Great Britain at the Commonwealth Games. And that was my target, if you like, was to get that sort of national representation. But unfortunately, that year was a year I started to pick up a few niggly injuries and things. And, it's one of the things where it's all about consistency in training. If you can keep your training injury free over, 8-9 years and consistently be developing, then you can get somewhere. But once you start to get those regular niggly injuries in, although you're sort of constantly sort of like trying to get fit and then getting injured, getting fit, getting injured, that's where you start to struggle a little bit and you sort of like start to gradually decline. And that's sort of where I was with it.
Right. Yeah, it's it doesn't change as you get older either, does it? Unfortunately.
Well, no, unfortunately, you just keep chipping away, aren't you? Sort of thing at that beast level.
What you've just said there is exactly my last 18 months, to be honest. So, but there you go. We still strive to carry on. You didn't manage to make the Commonwealth. So how far off were you? I guess in time. That's
about 4 or 5 seconds.
Wow. And I knew that was going to be your answer, because when you watch a lot of athletics and you see, we were watching the Diamond League last night, like I said, and the 5K, there was an American girl in there who just won the New York Mile. And then she's in this 5K with all these elite athletes. And, she didn't do bad. She wasn't that far away, maybe 10, 15 seconds. But you think from the winner to the end, it's like, it's nothing, is it? It's absolutely nothing. Yeah, so a bit of disappointment there then.
Yeah, a bit of disappointment. But I think at the same time, I guess at that point, I'd also sort of like had a bit of a change in my career. So I'd been at Rolls-Royce up until that point. And then I decided to have a bit of a career move. Right. And I started working for a HSBC bank and had moved down to Leicester.
Right.
And then had the opportunity then to move down to London, to the head offices in London. So my career was going really well at that point, sort of thing. So as well as sort of trying to pursue almost like a high-end amateur. You know, at the end of the day, there was no money in it.
No,
So, you
no.
know, none of this was being paid. It was all just sort of, you know, training in the evenings every day and at the weekends, and basically taking it at the same time, sort of pursuing what I was trying to do as a career, if you like, in terms of, you know, how high up the ladder can I get, you know, in these big corporates. So it was, I guess, sort of balancing at that time. It was sort of fairly well balanced, I sort of felt, you know, sort of thing. But it seemed to be working okay. But then I went down to London, and at that point, my track running had sort of fallen off by the wayside. I'd had to go at like 5,000 and just see where I could get to with my 5,000 meter running, and it was good at a club level. You know,
just out of interest, what was it at that time?
I got down to 1440.
Wow.
Which is, you know, it's okay, but it's not going to win you anything. Do you know what I mean? In the grand scheme of things, you know, it's not going to get you a championship, is it? You know.
Yeah, it's still rapid though, isn't it?
It was still good, and what I found was I then bumped into Martin Yelling, who's a friend of mine who I'd basically been steeplechasing with. So him and I were both steeplechasing at the same time, and I bumped into him. I think it was at the National Road Relays or something like that. And he said, "Oh, Mike," he says, "I've just taken up this sport called duathlon." Sort of thing. He says, "It's absolutely cracking." He goes, "I reckon you'd be really good at it. You'd love it." And I was like, "Really?" Sort of thing. It's like I've never ridden a bike in my life. You know, I had a bike, but I'd never ridden it competitively at all. I, you know, just used to use it for fun, really. And obviously, when I was a kid, I had a bike, and you know, we used to go around everywhere on bikes as kids. But I'd never done anything competitive at all. And he goes, "Oh yeah, you should have a go at it." So I said, "Oh well, maybe." I said, "Yeah, I'm going to have a go at the London Marathon in a year's time or so." So I've decided that's what I'm going to do. Because one of the things I found when I moved down to London, when you said to people, "Oh, I'm a runner," the first question they ask you is, "Oh, have you done the London Marathon?"
Yeah, I've had that before actually. I guess it's like when you're a triathlete and say, "Oh, have you done an Ironman?"
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, yeah.
There's a funny story about Tim Don. I don't know if you heard this story where when Tim won the World Championship back in the day, and he was on a flight to America, and I think he had some kit on or something, and somebody was sort of sitting next to him in the passenger seat on this flight, as sort of like was going, "Oh, are you a triathlete?" sort of thing, you know. And they were like, he was like, yeah, sort of thing, and they were like, "Oh wow, have you done the Ironman?" And he was like, no, I race Olympic level sort of thing. I do a race at Olympic level sort of thing. I'm actually world champion sort of thing. And they were like, "Oh, you ever going to do an Ironman?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like total disregard for any sort of achievements that didn't exist, wasn't an Ironman, you know.
Fortunately, the sport's moving away from that, I think, which is good.
Well, yeah. I don't know if it is in America. I think America's still very obsessed with
Yeah,
it. But
yeah.
yeah.
Well, it was, you know, like a lot of things in America, it was their thing, wasn't it? You know, they have their own world championships and things. So it's, you know, no surprise there, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically when I was down in London, you know, I'd sort of like come in on a Monday morning and sort of like these people go, "Oh, what do you do at the weekend?" sort of thing. I go, "Oh, I was competing, I was running or whatever in some national road relays or championships or something." And they go, "Oh, right, okay. Well, what do you do?" And I go, "Oh, I'm a steeplechaser, or I run on the road for my club or cross country or whatever." And the first thing they would always say is, "Have you ever run the London Marathon? Have you ever done it?" So I was like, "No." It's sort of, you progress through to that. It's like, you know, when you're a runner, you sort of like do that thing of sort of going, "Actually, I want to stay as quick as I can for as long as I can,
Yeah.
because I'm only going to get slower. If I move up, you know, sort of thing." It's like, you know, with triathlon sort of thing, you know, you should always focus on your sprint and your standard if you want to become fast, not make the mistake of going for your 70.3s and your Ironman stuff straight away. But yeah, it was, you know, I was eventually I sort of cracked, and I was like, "Okay, fine, I'm going to have a go at the marathon then, aren't I?" So I did the marathon, and I guess it was one of those things where, although I did okay at it, sort of thing, I didn't really enjoy the process. It was training for a marathon, for those who've done it properly, sort of thing, is actually quite a robotic thing to do. It, in the sense of, you know, if you're training for like a 5K or a short distance race, it's all about pushing yourself as hard as you can to get faster. Whereas in a marathon, it didn't really feel like that. It was just a very sort of logical progression of how far you can run, sort of thing. And I did my first half marathon, was the Great North Run, in the autumn the previous year in 2001. I did that. And I set off with the elite racers because they knew my name. So they put me on the elite start with the Kenyans. And we set off and we went through the first 5K in 15:02 or something ridiculous like that. And I was sort of going, oh dear, so I've never run this distance before. I've never raced over this distance before. I felt fine at that point. But by 11 miles, I was walking through the aid stations, sort of thing, really, really struggling,
I don't know whether you've seen recently Ingebrigtsen.
Yes.
Did you see what happened to him?
I didn't see. I just saw something on socials this morning about him walking.
Well, he did exactly the same thing. He went off with the elites and he was great at 5K. Soon as 10K came, that's it. He stopped. He just couldn't. He didn't respect the distance, I think, was which, he'll hold his hands up and say he didn't. But yeah, that just reminded me of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so easy, when you can run fast, sort of thing, or relatively fast, sort of thing, to just cruise along at a pace that feels totally comfortable to you and not realize the damage you're doing to yourself. Sort of thing, and actually then it all comes to bite you when you've not done that volume of training. Yeah. So I finished that and I was like, how the hell am I going to run a marathon? So I'd already made my decision I was going to do the marathon. I was like, how on earth am I going to run twice as far as this, in, what was it, 6 months time? Sort of thing, 7 months time. But basically just sort of like, setting yourself up that training plan where you just, every week you had an extra session, an extra rep on, or every week you had an extra mile on or whatever, and gradually build up. And then sure enough, by the time you get to sort of, March, April time the following year, you're able to do it. You think, I don't really understand what the difficulty was with it. I don't understand why I found it so hard.
And just tell everybody where you finished.
I think I was about 48th or something like that at London.
How many? About?
Well, God knows how many. I mean, I got beaten by Paula Radcliffe. That was the year that she ran her amazing time. So somewhat overshadowed by Paula's achievements.
But still, that's a claim to fame, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, going back to work on Monday morning, because it was quite good. So at the office, everyone knew I was doing it. So they'd all come out to watch. Cool. They'd all gone down into the office. So they all stood outside at the pub and cheered me on, sort of thing, as I went past, which was nice.
Nice.
But then I went back to work on Monday morning. The first question everyone was asking me was, "Oh, are you going to go pro now? Are you going to leave work and go pro?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding?" Sort of thing. It's like I am nowhere near, sort of like that sort of standard to be able to have a career or anything like that as a runner.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, come top 50, but I'm almost a minute a mile, behind what the winners. So that's the sort of.
For anybody looking in though, Mike, I mean, that's like what you did and the speed that you run is like, it's all right to you, you understand. But anybody from the outside looking in who has no clue and just sees where you finished amongst that amount of people, that's like phenomenal,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's something that people struggle to sort of like get in their heads when you watch, like, I remember watching Haile Gebrselassie, on the track, sort of thing, when he was knocking out his 10,000 meter world records and things. And you'd come into the office the next day, you'd have a bit of a chat, a bit of a water cooler chat about the athletics or something with people. And they'd sort of go, oh, could you beat him? Would you be up there with him? And it's like the concept of, what the gap is between, it's almost like there's three levels of gap. The gap between what they could do versus what I was doing, if I went out for a run with them, because people used to say that as well, was, I might come for a run with you at lunch. And you go, well, you're welcome to if you want, sort of thing, but you're not going to keep up for long. So the gap between what your average person can do versus what a trained athlete can do is huge. But then equally, the gap between a normal trained athlete and what the elite guys are doing, if I went down the track, I'd knock out a session of, reps, 400 meter reps or whatever, 15 400s, roughly trying to do the pace that Gebrselassie was doing all 25 of his laps in. Do you know what I mean? But I was having a minute recovery in between each one.
Yeah.
And I'd be struggling, So it's like, that the difference is huge.
Yeah. But like I say, people from the outside don't appreciate it, do they? I mean, you never really appreciate elite sport unless you actually, and sometimes even when you go and watch it, you don't appreciate it and the effort that it takes and how good they are. And that's a lot of sport. That's definitely athletics, cycling, football, if you like, as well. They are the cream of the crop, aren't they? And you think, oh, they make it look easy. Well, they do, because, they are the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've taken years and years. In fact, their whole lifetime, most of them. It's taken them a whole lifetime to get to what you see for that 1 hour that they're competing, if it's that length of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I think Malcolm Arnold's comment when he was talking about sort of training, he was interviewed, as the coach of the Brownie brothers, he talks about the training wall. And he says every session you do, when you turn up to training, every single session you do is like getting a brick, and you get given that brick and you put it in your wall. Yeah. And it's not about how the size of the brick. It's not about how big that brick is. It's about just getting that brick and putting it in the wall and building that wall as big as you can over years and years and years. And that's what gets you to the top. Yeah. Sort of thing. It's not about, he says he sees all the time these top athletes who come into the university or whatever with loads of talent, and they'll train for one championship or one competition, and then he won't see them for a couple of months, and then they'll come back and train again and get themselves up there again. But they're not consistent with that training of week in, week out, 3 times a week down the track, putting in the sessions. Yeah. And he says the guys who come to him at the start, who basically aren't necessarily that talented, but are consistent with their training and they put in the sessions week in, week out, they're the ones who make it in the long run to get their GB vests or whatever sort of thing at the elite level.
Yeah, consistency is key, isn't it?
100%. 100%.
If you listen to most coaches, that's what they say. Consistency is the key thing. So in between your half and, before you decided to do your marathon, and you'd heard about duathlons, had you done any duathlons, or was that just on the back burner until you got the marathon out of the way?
Yeah, literally, I didn't do a single one, sort of thing, until after the marathon had been done. And then I think it was 2002 I did the marathon. Yeah. And then I think it was September of that year, but when I'd recovered, I did one up in the northwest somewhere. I sort of went up to visit my sister up there and took my bike, some clapped out, road bike I had, sort of thing, out the garage, and sort of went up there and just had to go at the duathlon. And
what distance it was?
I think it was probably a sprint distance. It was probably like a little sprint distance one. And I found I won the first run, sort of thing. So obviously I'd come from this running background, got on the bike, and then my legs just filled with lactic on the bike, sort of thing. So it was really weird when I first started cycling that I had clearly a lot of strength and a lot of aerobic capacity, but absolutely no strength endurance in the cycling specific muscles that were required to be able to ride a bike. Yeah. So I used to be able to sort of go fast on the bike, but my legs would just burn with lactic in the way that I never got running. Sort of thing, you'd never get that running. It was sort of a totally different. I found it really weird getting used to that. And sort of instead of sort of, just going absolutely flat out like you would in a run, sort of thing, just running as hard as you can, sort of thing, you had to sort of develop that strength and sort of almost change your body shape to a certain extent to be able to cope with the demands of the cycling. So, especially and then running off the bike obviously was just an absolute survival. That first one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody struggles with running off the bike. It doesn't matter where you've come from. It's still, I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? As much practice as you can. I mean, practice makes it better, but it's still, after being sat down pedaling and then trying to get up running, it's a tough one. So after that, you were hooked then on duathlon, were you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I absolutely loved it. And the following year, I sort of made it a mission to sort of try and make the age group team.
How did you find out about the age group team?
So if I'm honest with you, triathlon and duathlon was my sort of lead into it, if you like, had always been something which I'd always aspired to from a young age, because sort of 220 magazine back in the day always had these pictures of a sunset background, sort of somebody on a bike, sort of riding along on a time trial bike in their speedos, looking really hunky and tan, sort of thing, and sort of flying along in Hawaii somewhere or Lanzarote. And you sort of think, oh, here I am sort of getting up and running around some park in, sort of Leeds or something on a Sunday morning. I could be doing this. This is a far cooler sport, So I'd always had this thing in my head of wanting to do triathlon at some point. And equally, I'd been over to La Santa training as some of my warm weather training.
Okay.
and seeing all the triathletes training over there. And I was just running, I was just running twice a day while I was over there and getting the miles in. But all these triathletes going around with all their posy kit on and sort of thing, with their fancy bikes and everything else. It looked way cooler than running did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was definitely something I'd sort of aspired to. And to be honest, I suppose I had done a few little duathlons because I'd done them in La Santa. So, you sort of hire the bikes out over there, sort of thing. You just do them in the morning, sort of they have these little morning races that they do. So when I'd been over there, my running friends, we'd had a go at triathlons and duathlons, albeit in a bit of fun sort of thing in La Santa. But it's one of the things I'd always aspired to have a go at. And so I'd looked into this idea of sort of like age group racing. Obviously at that time I was like, well, my serious racing's probably behind me now, but I'll have a go at this duathlon thing, just a bit of fun. So I did the race. I think it was a Fulton over in Switzerland. Was the World Championships.
And what distance was that?
It was a standard distance. So it was the Olympic distance. So 10:45. But the course, it was more like a fell race than a road race. Most duathlons tend to be pretty flat sort of thing. When you turn up to championships. But this one, the run course basically was like up a hill, run along the top, and then run down a steep hill sort of thing. It was almost like a little fell race.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, my background in orienteering sort of kicked in a little bit sort of thing. And actually, I absolutely loved it. Sort of thing. It was absolutely perfect for me. Yeah. And I remember coming back first on after the first run sort of thing, and then setting off on the bike. And I got caught by a couple of people on the bike because it was a challenging, quite a technical bike descent that you had to do. And then on the final run sort of thing, I managed to get myself back up to second place. So I came second.
Yeah, congratulations. Brilliant. How did you qualify? What was the races that you went for? And back in that time, was it much different to say what it's like now? Like from a competition point of view, and with your running background, there's a lot of questions here, by the way. I hope you're taking note. And with your running background, did you find it easy to qualify?
Yeah, so back then it was totally different. Nowadays, obviously, it's very organised. You go on the British Triathlon website. Back then, we didn't even have websites sort of thing. It was like it would all have been done by sort of like trying to find out some information somewhere. But it was sort of like nowadays, at the start of the season, even it's going to be announced, I guess, in the next month or so, what are going to be the qualifying races for the following year. You've got your duathlon, all your different distances, and obviously organisers like ourselves are sort of bidding to put these races on. Yeah, it was nothing like that back then. I think it was probably the British Championships were sort of like utilised as like the selection race, and I think it was the selection race for the elites as well, because they tended to select the elites off a non-drafting race. So I remember Cambridge was one. They always used Cambridge Triathlon as being a selection race. The Cambridge Duathlon, as a selection race. And then they tended to use wherever they were using for the elite race championships as well. But the elite championships were non-drafting back then, which was a bit strange sort of thing. I sort of went out there, I sort of gave it a try. What I found was I'd be up there in contention on the first run, running with the elites. But then on the bike, obviously they get on there. People like Andy Blow and people like that, they get on their time trial bikes with their disc wheels and sort of disappear off into the distance. And I'll be there going, oh crikey, I haven't got the legs for that. But it was sort of that first year. I found it fairly easy. I guess in the back of my head there was that thing of, oh, maybe I could qualify as an elite, sort of thing, But I didn't really. It's one of the things you want to sort of prove yourself a little bit and sort of get yourself, in there. And I think it was at a Fulton, the World Championships. I think my time on the first run was as fast as the lead bunch on the elites sort of thing. And so they said, the GB team came over and sort of like afterwards, and it was like Martin Yelling and people were representing them. And they said, well, Mike, actually, you'd probably do okay at the elite racing because you're fast enough on the run and all you've got to do is learn how to ride in the pack. You'll find that easier than trying to time trial sort of thing as a development, with someone with your ability. If you can actually get the skills to be able to ride the pack, you'll do okay. Yeah. And so that was what I went for the following year.
Right. You went for elite.
Yeah. So I went for elite. I actually raced elite for a couple of years. Right. So went over to places like Varello in Italy. Back then there was like a World Cup of elite racing for duathlon. And there was a race in Italy. It was that I think GB used to take like one. They used to go to the European Championships and then the World Championships and take a squad there for the elite, and everything else you could go to, but it had to be self-funded. So that first year I went to Varello, which was doubling up as the European Championships, and raced over there. Fantastic experience. Sort of like the first time I guess I'd raced properly for Great Britain, sort of like in the elite level, sort of thing, having never achieved it at orienteering, never achieved it in running. It sort of felt like crikey. Yeah, it was really nice to be able to sort of go, oh, I've actually sort of made it now, sort of thing, albeit, it's a duathlon, not triathlon. Yeah. It was, felt like a massive achievement for me to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at any elite level, you know what I mean? It doesn't, regardless of the sport. I mean, you just said there, albeit it wasn't triathlon, but I think, triathlon's seen as the pinnacle of our multi-sport, isn't it? But, not everybody's a good swimmer, are they? So that's the beauty of multi-sport.
Yeah, absolutely. So I raced for a couple of years doing that. Did the Swansea, held the European Championships the following year. I came 12th. I think I was probably my best performance. I came 12th in that at the European Champs.
Yeah.
And I was actually training for 2005 for the World Championships in Heel in Belgium. So Giel is how it's spelled, but it's Heel, I think it's pronounced, in Belgium. And that was my race where I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on this. I was like 35 and I was like, okay, I'm probably not going to be getting much faster in the future, sort of thing at this point, sort of thing. Maybe this is going to be my big chance to sort of like try and do something, And I actually had taken quite a bit of time off work to prepare for it and things. And sort of went over there and then got taken out by a Hungarian on a corner and crashed. So, and I guess that's racing, isn't it? That's elite racing,
especially draft racing. It's a different animal, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was like huge frustration, having spent a lot of time preparing and training for it, sort of thing, all while doing it as a full amateur, sort of thing, with sort of like doing what all the age groupers do today, sort of holding down full-time jobs in the city or whatever, and trying to cram all this training in, sort of thing. So it was good in the sense of I got to places that I never would have got to, and have seen things, and taken experiences I never would have had, in the past if I hadn't have experienced it. So it's like, it was definitely the pinnacle of my sort of elite sporting achievement. That.
Well, you hit target, didn't you? At the end of the day, you hit racing for GB at the elite level, so you tick that box.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the following year, my daughter was born, and in the back of my head, my wife and I talked about it. We were like, okay, this doesn't need to change. We'd done that classic first parent thing, new parent thing of planning how it wasn't going to change our lives, sort of thing, and how we had it all planned out. We got the baby joggers sorted. We bought treadmills. We got turbo trainers and stuff lined up so we could do all of our training, and it wasn't going to affect us whatsoever. And in actual fact, that year I went to my employers and I said, look, could I go down to just working 4 days a week rather than the 5, 5 days a week, and I want to train this year and just see how good I could get for it, for this duathlon, and see how I can make it. So they very, very generously agreed to that. And basically I'd sort of like 1 day a week be training, sort of like literally almost like trying to do a full-time athlete type thing of like literally just bang in a massive training day on a Wednesday midweek, and then sort of fit all my other training in. And I was sort of training twice a day on all the other days. But that whole thing of, we've got a newborn in the house. So I was getting up at, sort of like 4:00 in the morning to do like a morning feed. Then I'd go off to work, do a spin class or a gym session or whatever on the way to work a full day, come home, go out and do like a full run, full session or whatever in the evening, or a track session or whatever. And then come home about 9:00, sort of like, and go straight to bed. And then up the next day, 4:00, do it all again, sort of thing. Yeah. And that year went over to Hungary to the European Championships, managed to qualify as an elite for the elite champs again. Went over there, and I got halfway around the race, and I literally just broke down in tears. I just couldn't do it, and it was like literally this huge weight of sort of like expectation of trying to hold down a massive career in the city, trying to train twice a day every day, trying to be a dad and do everything that's expected of me at home, sort of thing. And it all just got too much. It all came out on the curb. Sat down on the curb, got off my bike, and sat on the curb, and sort of pulled my eyes out for sort of like 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? You've got this goal that you want to achieve, but as we all know, life changes, doesn't it? And to say life gets in the way, well, I don't agree with that. I think it's just we go through a process in life, and at certain points, you've got to do certain things, and you can't do other things, and that's it. And that, but for it to come out like that, in the middle of a race, it must have been quite a thing.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was quite sort of afterwards. I almost felt better afterwards.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was like I was so emotional about it all, sort of thing at the time. But then, sort of like actually later on that afternoon, sort of thing, I just felt like this huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I said to her, that's it. I'm never racing elite again. Forget it, sort of thing. It's like it's just too much. I can't do it.
You can't be the best at everything, can you? You can't give 100% to everything because there's only so much of you. So it must have been, quite a thing to try and keep all the plates rolling and spinning, as they say.
Yeah, and I think probably I'm one of them people who sort of doesn't really share that kind of stuff. I know nowadays it's all sort of like very popular to sort of like share. Everyone's sharing, isn't it, aren't they, sort of thing? But probably the year I come from, we don't do that sort of thing. You keep it.
I think the younger generation are better at it than us. So you didn't race after that. That was it. Done for a while. Got on.
Yeah. So basically, I said that's it. And I said, what I'm going to do now is sort of maybe set myself some new challenges, sort of thing. So I still want to be involved in sport. Sports plays such a huge part of my life and changed my life so much. I still want to continue with sport, and I still love multisport. I really, really did enjoy it. But I was like, you know what? Maybe I could have a go at swimming. And in my head, I was a great swimmer. Because I was like, you know what? I reckon I'm tall. I'm sort of 6 foot tall. I've got long arms. I've got big hands, sort of thing. I'm almost Michael Phelps, basically. So I could be really good at this sort of thing. I reckon if I do a bit of training, sort of thing, I reckon I could be a really good swimmer. So having never swum before whatsoever in any sort of competitive element, sort of thing, I went down my local tri club and sort of I said, I'd like to sort of like, can I come and join in with the swim sessions? And they were like, yeah, sure. So I got in the pool, and after one length, I was sort of gasping, for breath, sort of thing at the end, sort of thing, going, bloody hell, what the hell's this going on? I don't get it. I'm rubbish at this.
There's no correlation there, is there? As fit as you are, and then you get in some water, a body of water, and it's like, that doesn't transfer, does it? Absolutely not.
And I've had this sort of love-hate relationship with swimming ever since, sort of thing. I went off and got some lessons, some one-to-one coaching sort of thing for a few months to sort of like just try and give me the basics and try and get me somewhere where I could actually do a bit of swimming. But it's not anything which I've never managed to crack it, sort of thing. And I'm convinced it's one of them things you have to do as a kid, sort of thing. And if you learn when you were a child, sort of thing, if you become better competitive swimming when you're kids, sort of thing, will put you in a very, very good place for when you're older if you ever want to come back to it. Sort of thing. You never forget it. I don't think you never forget that technique and the how to do it. But then at the same time, what always amazes me is that when you go along to swim galas and that kind of stuff, the kids have terrible, awful swimming technique in the water, but are going twice as quick as most age group athletes would be. And I don't know if we just overthink it. I don't know if as adults.
I think it's like I refer back to watching elite athletes. They make it look easy, but the technical ability is there. You might not think it is, but it is. They're getting through that water efficiently, and that's why they're going as fast.
Yeah. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it is.
I mean, I remember Michael Phelps's coach saying his technique was awful. but I'm not going to tell him about it. And that just
Yeah.
tells you everything you need to know, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You learned to swim, and then did you do some triathlons on the back of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did that thing of, going back to my sort of running days, I guess, of going, look, I'm not gonna make that mistake of just going long straight away. I'll sort of try and build up and see if I can get reasonably quick at the various different bits. So I really enjoyed racing triathlons because every race felt like some kind of like a handicap race somehow. So you do the swim, and I'd sort of
I've
get
never
out.
heard it. I've never heard it said like that, but that's a brilliant way of looking at it.
I'd end up getting out, fairly in the back third, say, of the field. And it'd be like, well, thank God that's over. Right, let's crack on with it then, sort of thing, And I get on my bike and come flying through the field on my bike, sort of thing, post one of the fastest bike splits and then get on the run. It'll be like, right, here we go.
I'm here.
Happy days,
Yeah.
So yeah, I was never good as a triathlete overall. I just gave up too much on the swim, but I really, really enjoyed doing them. And it was the challenge, if you like, of trying to get through the longer distances as well. I'd always had that challenge at the back of my head, ever from those days of like being over in Lanzarote and seeing all the Ironman stuff over there. And you think, oh, one day I'll come back and do this, one day. Yeah. So that was one of my targets. I did go back and do like Ironman Lanzarote,
right,
1 year.
One of the tough ones.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was brilliant. I mean, obviously, having trained there so much, we actually go back there every year as like a family holiday. That's our idea of a family holiday, is going to Club de Santa. That probably says it all about the family. But
it's not a bad thing, is it? Myself and my wife do exactly the same. We don't go to Club de Santa. We go on the other side of the island. We're at Porto Calero.
Okay.
And they've just got a new leisure centre there, and we do exactly the same. In fact, we've just booked to go in November. But we like to go for 3 weeks in, beginning of the year for exactly that reason, just to take the bikes over, bit of swimming, bit of training, bit of warm weather. It's fab, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's like, if you can be physically fit and active and able to participate in it and do it, sort of thing, I think it's great. So they make the most of it while we can, sort of thing, in years to come, sort of thing. I'm sure we'll look back and go, maybe I wish I'd done more.
Well, in years to come, hopefully we'll still be doing it.
Well, yeah, let's hope so. So yeah, the swimming, the triathlon, really enjoyed it, and then I started to pick up quite a few sort of running related injuries. So I had a lot of calf problems and that kind of stuff, probably from years and years of sort of track running and sort of all that stuff I'd done back in my sort of like 20s, and teenage years and 20s and stuff. But yeah, my calves are pretty much shot to bits now from a running point of view. But I can still bike and I can still swim, albeit very badly. So a friend of mine did 1 year. He had trouble with his running as well, and he said, "Oh, sure, we could have a go at this thing called Aquabike." And I'm like, "Yeah, I suppose so," sort of thing. So we actually set ourselves a bit of a challenge to try and to qualify for the Aquabike European Champs in Ibiza in 2017.
Yeah,
and went over there and had a great time, sort of thing. Qualified for the team, and then went over there and had a great time and raced. Yeah, it was great to be putting on the GB top, sort of thing. As an age grouper and actually competing in the Aquabike.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
It was a nice event, that, actually. Yeah, enjoyed that one.
Yeah, it's good. And I think Aquabikes, it's a great sport. Obviously, as an event organizer now, it's growing. Sort of, it's one of the areas of the sport we're seeing growing quite a lot.
Yeah, because it's surprising how many people don't like running or they can't run. But
yeah,
and that's the wonderful thing about multisport, isn't it? People can do a range of different things. It doesn't have to be a triathlon, doesn't have to be a duathlon. They can aquabike. They can, if they don't like biking, they can do the aquathon. And it's there's something there for everybody, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when you're training, when you talk to people about sort of like people in the running club or whatever, and they're going, oh, I'm having a bit of a trouble with an injury, sort of thing. I've got this injury, I've got that injury, and you're like, well, if you did a bit of triathlon, you'd be able to sort of not worry too much about the running for a couple of weeks and just focus a bit more on your swimming and biking, still keep yourself fit and still get your daily endorphin hit, sort of thing, from going out and training and enjoying yourself. Not worry too much about it. But yeah, it's I love the best bit about triathlon, and it's interesting that someone said to you, what are you? What kind of athlete are you? I'd say I'm a triathlete, even though I very rarely compete. but the lifestyle, it's a lifestyle sport,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, if you said you were anything else, nobody would know. Well, nobody would know what you did. Oh, I'm an aquathlete or whatever the aquabike version of that is. Or I mean, I often say, oh, I'm a duathlete. Oh, I do a lot of duathlon. So what's that? Don't know
Yeah.
what it is. So yeah,
No one does. No one
triathlete.
does.
They all know what triathlon is, pretty much. What year was your last event then in Ibiza? Did you?
Yeah, 2017 was my last proper competitive event. Last time I did
Yeah.
did the age group stuff, and at some point I might come back and
Yeah.
give it another go, give the aquabike another go. My running dice. I keep every year. I get to a point in the year where I think, you know what, my calves aren't feeling too bad. Maybe I'll try again. Maybe I will try running again, and I'll do a bit of a build up sort of thing for a few weeks. I'm going, oh, it's all right, you know, it feels okay, and then sure enough,
And it
it
goes.
goes again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
every year I have that sort of like that build up and that disappointment when it comes. So maybe at some point I will go back to the aqua biking, and I know my friend's still doing it. Sort of he's still doing the age group stuff, so I might go and join him at one of the competitions in the future.
Tell us a little bit about the Triathlon Trust, because I saw that on your email. How you got involved with that?
So so the Triathlon Trust, back in as I was working for HSBC in the city, and then in 2012, sort of the fallout of all the financial crisis and stuff, you know, took a bit of a while for it all to filter through to sort of everyone's level, if you like, within the bank. But they were making sort of like redundancies and things and asking for people to leave. I'd been with the bank for 14 years, something like that, and done the whole commuting into London for a long time. And suddenly realised that my daughter was at that point 7 years old, and actually I'd not really spent that much time with her, sort of thing, because, you know, as an athlete, you know, you're competing, you're training, you're, you know, going to work, albeit I wasn't doing it at an elite level anymore. I was still training every day and getting up early, working long hours, coming home late, and basically hadn't really seen her apart from at the weekends. And I was like, you know what, maybe there's more to life than, you know, maybe this whole career thing, there's more to life than this career. So I feel like I want to do something different. So when the opportunities came around for redundancy and things, it also coincided with the Olympics in London. And I was like, you know what, I could actually have a few months off here and actually sort of watch the Olympics, enjoy the Olympics, and then sort of reassess what I'm doing. So I enjoyed the summer, sort of thing, watched loads of the Olympics, and managed to watched all the free stuff, the mountain biking and the road cycling and the triathlon and everything else. Fantastic time. London really put on a show, absolutely brilliant. And then someone who I'd been working with at HSBC had become the chair of the Triathlon Trust, which is the official charity of British Triathlon.
Okay.
And he had basically said, look, you know, I'll come in. At the time, the Triathlon Trust didn't really have an objective at all. It was just that they'd created a charity because it's sort of one of the things governing bodies do. They all have a charity of some sort. And so they created this charity, but not really decided what they wanted to do with it. And so they brought my friend in to sort of like say, look, you know, do you want to sort of chair this up for us? We need a bit of direction giving to it. And he went, well, I'll do it, but only on one basis. And that is that we actually employ somebody properly to run this on a day-to-day basis, because otherwise it won't go anywhere and it won't do anything. So they agreed and they brought me in. They asked me and said, you know, would I be interested in looking into this? So I said, well, maybe initially I'll just come in and, you know, sort of like just to do a bit of consultancy type stuff and just sort of assess what it could be. So I sort of came in and I said, well, look, at the moment, you know, everything in the news is about childhood obesity, lack of physical activity in kids. I'm seeing it myself in my daughter's school, sort of thing. You know, the number of kids you see who are just, you know, so physically out of shape, you know, in primary school is absolutely shocking. And all the stats and stuff sort of like backed all this up, you know, sort of thing, all the government reviews and everything, loads and loads of reports coming out, loads of money being spent on reviews, but nobody actually doing anything about it. So I said, look, you know, maybe the charity could actually be trying to incentivize kids and try and work with kids and show them that actually, you know, compared to when we were kids, we sort of had the opportunities to do loads of physical sport. You know, we were chucked out of the house in the morning, you know, especially in the summer holidays, you were chucked out at daylight and come home for tea sort of thing, or come home when you get hungry. Yeah. That sort of thing just doesn't exist anymore. And so all these kids are sitting at home watching TV or tablets or whatever sort of thing all day long. And unless their parents are actually taking them somewhere to do something, they don't actually get any much physical activity. So I said, what I want to do is when they do get the opportunity to do physical activity, it's being done in quite a controlled environment, in a competitive environment, where if they're not already good at it, they feel quite negative. They get quite a negative experience as a result of it, because there's always those sporty kids who are going to beat them, sort of thing, and make them look stupid. So therefore, or in their heads, make them look stupid. Yeah. So therefore, they're getting quite a negative attitude towards physical activity. So I said, maybe there's something we can do where we go into schools, we work with schools, and make it so that it's got to be aspirational. But I said, with the Olympics and everything, sort of like with the Brownlee brothers and all the medals that we're winning, triathlon's on a bit of a high at the moment. So I think triathlon is seen as one of those aspirational sports. You need much skill to actually complete a triathlon. It's not like football, where in order to be good, you've got to be able to kick the ball really well. Going back to my early days at school, wanted to do sport, but was absolutely rubbish at all the skill sports, the tennis, the cricket, the football, the rugby. I had no skill whatsoever, no hand-eye coordination or ball skills. So I was rubbish at it. Well, triathlon's just not like that sort of thing. If you can ride a bike and you can learn to ride a bike and you can learn to swim, which are all skills that you should all be learning anyway, because they're good life skills, and you can learn to run better, then actually you can put it all together and do triathlon. So it's a really basic sport in one sense, but also a sport which actually is a real wow factor around it as well. So what we said, we set ourselves a challenge, which was, well, it's really hard. So is there a way we can sort of make this fun as well? So the kids not only sort of like have a wow factor of having achieved something, but also they go, I really, really enjoyed that. So we basically were going into, with two things that we did. One thing that we did was we would set up triathlon events for primary school children at leisure centres. And we'd send invites to all the local primary schools to say, we want your schools to come along and participate in these triathlons. And it was aimed at sort of year 4, 5, and 6 in schools. Yeah. So sort of the slightly older end of primary. And we said, you don't need to know how to swim. You don't need to know how to ride a bike. All you need to do is bring your swimming stuff with you and bring your PE kit. That's all you've got to do. We will provide everything else for you. So the schools would then turn up to a leisure centre. Yeah. We would come along with a van full of bikes and helmets. And we also had scooters. We also had tandems in there, a tandem in there as well. The kids would basically all go in as a class and they would get ready for a swim. And we give them all a bucket to put all their clothes in, their bags and their clothes in. And then they would line up, go into the pool area. And the idea was they would swim 3 sides of the pool. Okay, at the edge, they get in at one corner, get out at the other corner. So they'd swim 3 sides around the pool and get out. If you can't swim, then just stay in the shallow end and just do a width across the shallow end. Yeah, it's not timed or anything like that. It's literally just a completion exercise. Yeah. So, of course, the kids who are really competitive, they're all pushing themselves to the front and they're all racing round doing the 3 sides. The kids who can't swim are just getting in the water and doing their width. Yeah, doesn't matter. We even went to some places where we had girls who, for cultural reasons, had never been in water before.
Yeah.
And were getting in literally fully clothed from head to toe, fully clothed into the water and walking across the shallow end and getting out. One experience for them, to do that. Yeah. And then they'd pick up their box, they'd go to their box and they'd basically have their PE kit, stick your PE kit on over the top of your swimming costume, that you've done or whatever you've done your swimming, sort of thing. Put your trainers on, then carry your box outside with you. You give that to one of our marshals. They then take that to the finish line. So that's your transition done, and then you run to where we had the bikes. We would then fit them with a helmet. Okay, so we'd have like loads of helmets there, and we'd literally just stick a helmet on the head, clip it, make sure it's safe, go to the next person who would then fit you to a bike very quickly. Sort of things. We had a whole range of bikes there, different sizes. Stick them on the bike and go off you go, follow the course. And we'd set out a course on a playing field that basically took them on a 1 kilometre loop or 2 500-metre lap loops round the playing fields and then into the finish to come back again. We take their bike off them, recycle that so it was ready for the next kids coming through, take the helmet off them, recycle that, and then they would then go off on their run and run round to a finish line where they then all got a medal for finishing. All right. And like I said, if the kids couldn't ride bikes, we give them a scooter so they could scoot instead. And we also, if you had anyone with any disabilities or special needs or whatever, they could go on the back of a tandem, and we'd take them around on the tandem, or one of the teachers could take them around on this tandem. And we even used to have a couple of bikes set up on turbo trainers. So at the very least, we could get a kid on a turbo trainer and go, right, you're going to stay on the turbo trainer until that kid comes round again. So everybody could get involved and have a go. And the feedback we got from that was fantastic, and it was all sponsored. We managed to pick up sponsorship from Tata. So this was the old Kids of Steel. You might have heard of the Tata Kids of Steel, stuff. So it was all funded through sponsorship from Tata at the time, and then some of that dropped off, and we actually started getting funding independently from various bodies around the place, and we also started working with the Brownlee Foundation as well on this. And we sort of put these on for the Brownlee Foundation.
Right.
And I'm pleased to say, unfortunately, when COVID hit, we had to disband it all, because the idea of going into schools and taking all your bikes and your helmets and everything, going, hey, we're sharing. It's like, whoa, for 3 years or whatever, nobody wanted to share anything or touch anything, did they? So, unfortunately, our activity at the Tri Trust went by the wayside, and we had to disband the team. But the Brownlee Foundation has carried on doing that now.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
they're still going.
You were basically the precursor to the Brownlee Foundation then.
Well, I mean, obviously the Brownlee Foundation, they were the funders of it or everything, but we sat down with them up in Leeds. So we'd gone up to Leeds and put on one of the events up there, and they'd come along and seen what we were doing. And sort of they got interested in it and said, look, can we do this? Can we do this ourselves? Sort of thing. And they've obviously done it with their sponsors. They've got a lot of support from the likes of Hoover, etc., who are sort of helping them to put these events on. And so they, through various iterations of what they were doing. But the concept of, you go into a leisure centre and you can put on an event that gets 1,000 kids a day doing a triathlon, getting the experience of a triathlon, and going home with a medal that basically says, today I became a triathlete, sort of thing. That in our mind was huge, sort of thing, in terms of, I have heard stories of people who I've seen in my daughter's age, sort of thing, coming into races now, went, oh yeah, my first race was actually one of your Brownlee Foundation, or, a Brownlee Foundation event, or a Kids of Steel race, or whatever. That was how I did my first triathlon.
Amazing. Amazing.
So yeah. It's great to know that we're sort of introducing people to it. And as I say, does it change their life on day one? Probably not. But at some point in the future, hopefully it would give them confidence that, I could do that. And maybe I will have a go at going down to parkrun and having a go at parkrun, or I will go and get a bike out and go for a bike ride or whatever. Because it just makes them realise that things are achievable, and, it's all sort of manageable.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. That's a great story. I mean, it's to have come up with that idea and to bring it to the masses is just, it's amazing. And not only that, but it brings on the next generation of triathletes and duathletes, and potentially, doesn't it? So get that in.
Another format we had. We actually had two formats. That was our summer format, and our winter format arguably was even more successful, which was it was linked with the UK Space Agency, which is a bizarre combination. I literally had a phone call one day, and it was someone going, hi there, I'm from the UK Space Agency, sort of thing, we'd like to have a chat with you about something. And I'm like, well, that's not a conversation you expect to have every day, And it was when Tim Peake was going to the space station back in, I can't remember when it was now, 2016 was it, or something like that?
Yeah.
And they basically wanted to do a program, but Tim Peake is actually a really big supporter of physical activity and belief in sort of getting people physically active. And he wanted some kind of school program to take place linked with physical activity and his visit to the space station. So we came up with this idea, which was going into primary schools. We'd set out all of our bikes on turbo trainers, and each bike would have a trip computer attached to the rear wheel, because they're all on-wheel turbo trainers. And we set up a small 150-meter loop on the playing fields for them to run around. And what we did was, the challenge was, can you collectively, as a school, travel the distance to the International Space Station in a day? So what we would do is, each class would come to us for about half an hour, in the school. So primary school kids again. But we started with the year ones, with the little ones at this time as well. So we go right from the year ones all the way up to year sixes. And for half an hour, we split them into 3 groups. So you got a group, a class of 60, say, or two classes of 60. Yeah. You basically got 60 kids you're dealing with. So you have 3 groups of 20. So you'd have 20 of them on the turbo trainers, cycling as fast as they can. You have 20 of them running laps, and you count how many laps they're running. And the other 20 are resting. All right. I want to say resting. We'll come back to that in a minute. Yeah. Because basically every 2 minutes you blow a whistle and you rotate round. Okay. So the kids who have been on the bike now get off and run. So they're getting the brick leg experience. Yeah. And the kids who have been the running are now have a rest. And the kids who were resting jump on the bikes. And they go for 2 minutes, go as hard as you can. Yeah. And we came up with this idea sort of thing. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but we'll give it a go. Every school we went to said it was the most successful physical activity event they'd ever held. So it totally captured the imaginations of the kids, because when we did an assembly in the morning where we introduced what we're going to do, and we had a video from Tim Peake in the space station, floating around in his space station sort of thing, setting the challenge for the day, which was, guys, this is what we're doing. We're going to challenge you to see if you can travel the distance. So they're immediately, sort of like buying into that, which was great. When the kids came to us and did their thing, what worked really well was the fact that the really sporty kids wanted to know how fast they could do it. So the trip computer on the rear wheel, they'd go, sir, tell me how fast I'm going. So you go over and you stand next to them and you go, you're doing 30 kilometers an hour. How fast can you go? You're doing 31, you're doing 32, 33, 34. Come on, go. And they would just be absolutely loving it. And they'd be bright red face, sweating, sort of like giving it everything. They absolutely would love it. The kids who were really unfit loved it because they could join in and be at exactly the same point as everyone else, because you're on turbo trainers. And nobody could tell how fast or slow they were going. Yeah. Because no one was ahead, physically ahead. Yeah, sort of thing. You're all just in a line next to each other. Yeah. So a child can get on there. They might be doing 10 kilometers an hour. Kid next to him is doing 30 plus. Yeah, sort of thing. It didn't matter. So everybody contributed. The child who's doing 10 kilometers an hour is still contributing as long as they're still pedaling and still pushing it in the pedals around. So they loved it as well, because all of a sudden there's they're feeling valued for their input at actually doing something physical. Yeah. We also had children with special needs in the schools. Increasingly within schools, we're seeing a lot of children with special needs now of varying types, both physical and mental. And you get these children brought along with their teaching assistants. And it would be like, we brought them down just to see what's going on. They're not going to get involved. Don't worry, sort of thing. It was like, no, they can get involved, sort of thing. Let's go and show them what it is. So we'd take them over, children with autism and that kind of thing. And we'd get them on the bikes. And they would, all of a sudden, this big smile would sort of just go across their face. And they'd join in and get involved. Because it wasn't risky. They could do it. We could just reserve one of the bikes for them, because we had enough bikes. And we could go, you can stay on it as long as you want, sort of thing. You don't worry about the rotation round and everything. If you don't want to, you just stay on the bike, and just enjoy yourself. So all of a sudden, these kids who were totally excluded normally from doing physical activity, all of a sudden were feeling included, and they were contributing to the totals as well. So they got to do it as well.
Brilliant.
So the schools came back to us with sort of the positive feedback that we got. And actually a lot of the schools, when the funding disappeared after he'd done his trip, a lot of the schools contacted us and said, we want you to come back, we'll pay you to come back in, and actually we want this day to continue, sort of thing, because actually it was fantastic. The kids still talk about it now, sort of thing, a year on. So we want you to come back. So, and yet again, that's a real shame that that COVID obviously put an end to that as well. But there you go.
Has anybody other than the Brownies took that up?
Not as far as I'm aware. No, I mean, it was sort of one of them things that not many people knew about. Do you know what I mean? We sort of struggled to get the message out there a little bit, to sort of shout about it and sort of say what we're doing. And I think with a lot of charity work, at the end of the day, you could do some great stuff. And when you tell people the stories, they go, oh, wow, that's amazing. That's great, sort of thing. But it's not something that people necessarily want to get involved in for whatever reason, sort of thing. It's sort of seen as that's great, but I'd like someone else to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those I've always found, having kids myself, and our triathlon club, when we first developed it, all the athletes were of an age where the kids were oldish, and we used to get asked all the time about putting things on for kids. Well, we'd done all that with our kids, so we weren't interested in doing it again for other people's kids, and the parents just weren't interested. They just wanted to literally let the kids go somewhere and not get involved. And I think you need that level of involvement from the parents, don't you, to get involved and actually to take it on.
Yeah.
You need that sort of leadership from the parents of the kids who they want to get involved. And I think that's the most difficult task.
It is, and you saw this quite a lot, sort of thing, with that. Sometimes you'd get like these children, sort of like you go into the schools and you'd find one or two children within the schools who sort of like the teachers might sort of come over to you and go, you just be a little bit careful with this one here, sort of thing, tends to have a bit of a meltdown, or it's got a bit of a difficult home background or whatever, sort of thing, be a bit careful. So, we sort of like know some children. And then, occasionally a child would come up to us and say, is there any possibility I've always wanted to learn how to ride a bike. Could I come to you at lunchtime and have a go trying to ride one of the bikes? And we go, yeah, absolutely, sort of thing. We'll get one of the bikes off the turbos, we'll take it outside, get your helmet, and we'll try and teach you how to ride a bike. And I remember going into this one school and sort of like, this child was there. We spent all lunchtime with this child, sort of like doing the whole running behind with them, sort of thing, trying to encourage them to ride the bike. And they were getting it. They improved a lot from the start to the finish. And then we said, look, listen, so you've got to go back to your lessons now. Sort of the lunch is over. But if you want, at the end of the day, if you want to come back, we're going to be here packing down and stuff. We could do another 10, 15 minutes with you at the end of the day. So it gets to the end of the day, and sort of like, we're sort of like on the lookout for this child. And this child sort of appears, starts to head over to us, sort of thing. We're like, okay, great, let's get the bikes out, sort of thing, so we do another 10, 15 minutes. And then the parent turns up and goes, Johnny, sort of thing, where are you going? Get your horse over here, sort of thing, we got to go, sort of thing. And it's like, we were just going to try and like, help him a little bit, and get him riding the bike. I ain't got time for that, sort of thing. I need to get here, and it's like off Johnny gets dragged. Yeah. And it's like, you can help, but there's only so much you can do, sort of thing, and it is, at the end of the day, it is, the home life that they have.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard, very hard.
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. So from there, you're now involved in the ATW. Do you want to tell us about that and how that come about?
So that came about during COVID, actually. So, like I say, we all had to disband the activities of the charity. The Triathlon Trust still exists, but it's not doing any actual delivery work now anymore. But yeah, all of the people, all the employees, if you like, that were in the charity and had to sort of like, all we got made redundant, and we all went off and did our various other things. And at the time, I was sort of like, as most people were, I guess, during COVID, sort of like a bit of a loose end. I'm not the kind of person who's very good at doing nothing, sort of thing. It's like one of my worst nightmares is going on a holiday, one of these beach holidays where you sit there and do nothing. I can't handle that. So I was sort of looking for things to do during that period. So I was conscious of the fact also I didn't have a job to go to at the end when COVID did eventually finish. And I got talking with James Shipley from ATW, and he was telling me about the fact they'd opened up a swim lake, an open water swim lake, or they were planning on opening up. They hadn't actually opened it. They were planning on opening it that summer when COVID hit in the March period. Yeah. And he knew that I was also involved in triathlon related things. So I think he also knew my daughter does triathlon things. And he said, we're going to do a bit of a test. He said, I've got a bit of an idea about how we could maybe run this in a COVID safe way when we're allowed to do it. If you want to come down on this day, this night or whatever sort of thing, we're going to try and run a bit of a test scenario sort of thing, just see if it works. So I went down there, took my daughter with me sort of thing. And we sort of like, there's like 5 of us or something having a go in the water sort of thing, and just trying out various different things to try if we could run this in a safe way. And then at the end of it, I said, listen, if you need help sort of doing this, I'm happy to come down and just help, sort of thing, run the lake. As I'm literally at a loose end, it's driving me nuts, sort of thing. I'm happy just to come down and help out. And so boys came on the news, sort of thing, and said, I think there'd been rumours that open water swimming was going to be allowed, sort of thing. And then sure enough, he came out on like the Thursday or something and said, as of this weekend, you're allowed to go open water swimming, sort of thing. So we literally, ATW opened up the swim lake that weekend. And over the space of, during that lockdown period, we had, I think it was something like 2,000 people a week swimming at the lake.
Yeah.
And we had everybody there. We had international swimmers who basically had no pools because there was no pools open. So we had international swimmers down there. We had Lucy Charles training down there regularly. We had NHS nurses coming down after their shifts going, oh my God, you don't believe how much of a lifesaver this is for me, sort of thing. It's like, this is the only thing that's keeping me going right now, is knowing I can come here and get into the water and wash away the stresses that I've got going on in my life right now. We had doctors coming down there, and just obviously triathletes, members of the public, etc., sort of thing, coming down and doing these sessions. And it was all done in a very sort of like safe and controlled way. We had sort of like you had a half hour, a bit like the old swimming pools where you had the wristbands, sort of thing. You had a half hour slot that you had to turn up, and you could swim for half an hour or whatever, sort of thing, and you had to get out. But yeah, basically we were just open as much as we could, and try to give people that opening to be able to sort of keep physically active again. It's that thing again. I'm a firm believer of sort of giving people the opportunity to sort of like get as physically active as they can. Yeah. So that summer I sort of worked with them, and then at the end of the summer, James turned around and said, "Look, if you want, there's a job for you at ATW." Sort of thing. I think we could do something here. Sort of thing. I think with the energy and enthusiasm that we both got, we could sort of like make ATW a serious event team, and things are sort of growing from there.
And what year was that exactly when it?
That would have been, I'm trying to remember what year. God, we can't even remember what year COVID was now. 21.
21, yeah.
I was sort of thinking 2021, something like that. And so we held the first multisport event in the country, post-COVID. So I think yet again, boys came out and said you could now do organised sport. So again, and that was on the Wednesday. Was it Wednesday he did his announcements? He used to stand in front of his
lectern. I think so, yeah.
So he did the announcement on Wednesday, and on Saturday, we held an aquathlon down at the lake. And we called it the not Sweet Caroline aquathlon. And then all the way through the aquathlon, we played Sweet Caroline, because it was no reaching out, no touching me, no touching you, and all this kind of stuff, So it was all a bit tongue in cheek, sort of thing. But it was great, and all the people who'd been down there swimming sort of came along and supported it. We had Lucy Charles down there and stuff as well, taking part in it, sort of thing. But it was great, the triathlon community were all dying to do something, having spent all cooped up, not allowed to do anything. We did this sort of COVID safe thing, everyone queuing up, sort of thing, with 2 meter gaps between us to get in the water, but nobody cared. It was like, I just want to do something. I don't care how we do it, So yeah,
cool.
We started there, and things have sort of grown since, So coming out of COVID, I guess ATW was in quite a fortunate position. Most event organisers had a terrible time, during COVID, because obviously they'd been preparing to deliver events from that sort of Easter onwards for the summer, and then suddenly found the plug pulled on all of their events. Because even though you could do some things, there were a lot of events you couldn't organise still in the summer. There's a huge variation between the attitudes that councils were taking, as to whether you could put your events on or not. What we found was, if you could find a venue that was self-contained and you didn't have to leave the venue to be able to put your event on, then actually you were allowed to do it. Because the council just didn't want you in a public space. But if it was a private space, then they didn't really have any jurisdiction to say that you couldn't do it, sort of thing. And then as long as you were satisfying the venue that you were doing it in a secure and safe way, then they let you go ahead. So yeah, we were fortunate that the open water swimming had sort of kept the business afloat during that period, whereas a lot of other organisers had no income coming in, for that period, and then found they couldn't put their events on, and now they're getting, they're in a situation where all the athletes are going, well, where's my event, sort of thing, this summer, and they go, well, sorry, the event's not going to happen, and they go, no, okay, I might defer to next year then, and the answer was, well, a lot of organisers said, well, no, because we've already spent the money, quite frankly, sort of thing. So we there won't be an event next year either, sort of thing. And if you want to enter next year, we'll put the event on, but you got to pay again, or that's it, the event's cancelled and we're never going to run it again.
Yeah, yeah, so, it was sad. Well, it was sad for a lot of reasons, but that was just one of them,
Yeah, absolutely. So at ATW, I guess we came out of it in a lot stronger position than a lot of other people, and we were able to sort of build on that. Yeah. So a lot of events, a lot of loved events, if you like, that people were saying, no, we don't want to. I don't want to do this anymore. We were able to sort of like say, well, look, if you want, you can pass it over to us, and we'll keep that event going, sort of thing. Or we'll buy that event off you, or whatever, sort of thing. So we were able to sort of like keep some of the sort of classic events, if you like, which are in the triathlon calendar. We were able to pull into our portfolio and do them. And as we had a fairly decent sized portfolio, because at that time there was still a lot of events being cancelled at the last minute, but we were able to defer people and say, don't worry about it, that event's been cancelled, you could just do another event instead. There's another one in 2 weeks time or in 3 weeks time. So I know Ironman, for example, a lot of their events, they sort of pulled the plug on them and then went, no, sorry, that's it, you've lost your money, that's it. You can have a 10% discount on next year's entry fee type thing. Whereas we were saying, don't worry, we actually had a documented COVID policy, which was, if we have to cancel an event due to COVID, you can do another event. We'll just pass you, we guarantee you will have an event of some sort, you can just choose another event to enter. Yeah. So, yeah, we were able to sort of build that confidence up in people a little bit that they weren't going to lose their money, if they sort of entered with us, which was important to people.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, to have the trust of an events company, that's massive, I think, for any athlete, because all the time and effort that they put in training and then the money that goes into it as well. It's, as we all know, it's not a cheap sport to do in either time or financial wise. So yeah, that's really, 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 really good. So you've been there from the off, and it's grown and grown each year.
Yeah, absolutely. So since 2021, we've we pulled in some bigger events. We spent, I guess, to a certain extent, we're still developing. I would say ATW is still developing. You see a lot of the other big names like Outlaw, etc. They seem to have a very set model now as to what they're doing. But we've tried a few different things. We sort of had a bit of a delve into doing canicross events, for example, last winter, because we felt there was a bit of a demand for that. But then trail running as well, it sort of felt like there was a bit of a demand, a growing demand for trail running. But I think what we found is that in our space, we have a sort of a niche market, if you like, of something we're really good at, which is multisport. So duathlons, triathlons, aquabike, etc. And we have a really strong following in that area. But what we don't have necessarily is the outreach to say, oh yeah, we're going to try something totally new and we're going to do trail running and say, sort of thing, because actually people aren't looking for at ATW for trail running events. So we'd end up sort of like, we're still putting events on, and we still put the events on, but just not with the numbers that you need to make them successful in those other areas. So yeah, we have sort of refocused ourselves a little bit back on the sort of multisport. Back and on running events. Obviously, we've got a strong base in running. We do the St Albans Half Marathon, Watford Half Marathon, and the Bedford Running Festival, 3 of our largest events that we organise. So we've got, experience of being able to put those on, and hopefully, even when I was working at the Tri Trust, my thing was I want people to turn up and go, wow. If you could get people to turn up to an event and go, wow, when no matter what the event is, then that's what you're doing something right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from a participation point of view, I think obviously the events vary in. I did a cross duathlon 3 or 4 weeks ago at Cannock Chase.
Oh, yeah.
And it was basic. It was cheap. They had a standard duathlon. They had a sprint duathlon, all off road in the forest. But to coincide with that, they also had 10K runs and 5K runs and running with your dog, which I thought was, from a small event to reach out to other people to get them involved. I
Yeah.
thought that was a stroke of genius. I'd never really come across that before, especially because I don't normally do cross. I normally do road races. So yeah, that was a really good experience. But it was basic, but it was so well done, and no, no t-shirt or anything like that. I got a nice wooden medal, but it's just
Funny, we've got one coming up in the near future at Holdenby House in
yeah,
Northamptonshire,
yeah,
and that's a duathlon. And yet again, we've got exactly the same thing going on. We've got a 5K, 10K, and trail half marathon going on, and a canicross,
yeah,
and a duathlon going on alongside it as well. That's a road duathlon, but it's a trail run for it. So, and it's a way of sort of bringing in a new event. If it was just a duathlon, you couldn't do it because
yeah,
you wouldn't make enough income on a new event these days to be able to make that viable. Sort of thing, you lose a fortune on it.
yeah.
These venues aren't cheap.
No,
Sort of
no,
things.
absolutely not. And I think also that getting the runners in and seeing people doing duathlon, it brings a different dimension for those runners, doesn't it? Oh, we didn't know about this. What's this? And maybe next time they'll go and do the duathlon and tell a friend.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So it's another way of growing the sport, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the sport, when I say the sport sort of thing, multisport
Yeah,
is, I feel, growing now. It felt like for a while post COVID sort of thing, it was at best stagnant sort of thing, and we've seen a lot of events get cancelled, not being held anymore, etc. And I think it's taken a while. But my theory was that during COVID, pre-COVID, there were loads of people doing triathlon. It was booming, right? And then during COVID, what you found was that continue doing triathlon takes a lot of work, a lot of training. Yeah, sort of thing. You're swimming, you're biking, you're running. So the people who are doing it serious, you don't have to do the training, but if you want to be serious at it, it takes a lot of training. And all those serious athletes during COVID were going, well, why am I killing myself swimming, biking, running, trying to keep myself at this sort of high level of fitness when there's no events to do? It's like maybe I'll just go running and just enjoy my running for a bit, or I'll just ride my bike. I won't kill myself following a training program. And then after COVID, the number of times we heard from people, you say, "Oh, you're coming out and doing a race?" Then our regulars, and they go, "I'd love to, but I'm just not fit enough." Sort of thing. I've just lost it. I've lost where I was, and actually to get back to there was going to be such a huge effort on my part. I just don't think I want to do it, and I don't want to compete at a level where I know I used to be much better. So I totally get it. I totally understand that.
And plus, they probably allocated that time that they used to spend, training, doing other stuff as well, which, especially when you got a family life, it's not easy to get back, is it? Once you give it away to other things, it's just difficult, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it was hard. But now what we're seeing is that, for a couple of years, it sort of stabilized like that. And, some of the events just weren't really pulling in the numbers. And even the start of this season, I would say in 2024, for the first couple of months, I would say numbers were at best level, possibly down on previous years. And my theory is that some of this is weather related. So when it's cold and wet in spring, nobody's motivated to go online and go, you know what, I think I'm going to enter a triathlon. Because you look out the window and you're thinking, well, if I'm going to go for a bike ride, I need to have long tops on, I need a waterproof, and I need to have long leggings on. The last thing I want to do is do a triathlon while I'm going to, run race in a skin suit, sort of thing, in a dry suit. I'll get me freezing. So I think there is definitely a link to the weather, sort of thing. And this spring was shocking. It was like wet and cold every day, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
But what we've seen in literally the last month is a definite increase in numbers and participation happening, with a lot of beginners, a lot of first timers coming along to the sport as well. I'd say 30% of the field is people never done triathlon before, which is absolutely brilliant, and younger people as well, because the sport was definitely feeling like it was becoming a bit like golf, a bit of an old person's sport sort of thing.
Well, I guess the other thing to add to that was there was a year or so ago, 18 months, cost of living and everything was going up, wasn't it? And And you guys you've got to go accordingly, haven't you? And events were becoming a lot more expensive, and people couldn't afford it. That,
Yeah,
to be brutally honest, it was not like that. It's not top priority, is it? And it's not a cheap sport at the end of the day.
it isn't. It isn't. Well, what's interesting along that though is that I think it depends on the type of event. So one of the things we launched last year, a couple of years ago, was a full distance triathlon sort of thing, because we were like, they're so expensive. Yeah, these full distance triathlons are. We wanted to put something into the marketplace that wasn't so expensive and that was more attainable. Especially with like cost of living crisis going on. So we launched the Odyssey triathlon from St. Neots, and it's quite interesting when you talk to people about sort of, it's getting a steady number. It hasn't grown massively, sort of thing, like the way we thought it would. We thought people would jump on that. It's like,
what's the cost of that then, Mike?
Well, you put me on the spot now. I think it's I think it's £200 or something like that. I think it is.
Yeah.
So in comparison to like your Ironman costs of like 500 or whatever it is,
I was just going to say, because they've just released the Leeds dates, haven't they? And that's just like 500 quid is just mind blowing, really.
Yeah,
I think for me,
So we were like, we want to put something on that's within people's achievement. We also did like a payment plan with it, so you can spread your payments on a monthly basis, sort of thing. Yeah. So you pay whatever it is, sort of like £30 a month or something.
Yeah.
And we were like, you know what, that's hopefully gonna pull people in. And initially it did. We got a lot of positive response initially, but then it sort of died off a little bit. And we were like, oh, that's strange. And we thought this was an issue, that we were addressing. But then when you get talking to people about it, they go, well, if I'm going to do a full distance race, I want to go abroad. I want to spend loads of money going somewhere where it's going to be a closed road event, somewhere hot, somewhere I can go and put a training camp in for as well. And I'm going to spend 10 grand on it. And it's like, okay, and I guess there's different audiences out there, but it almost feels like there are a lot of people out there who are saying, look, if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to do one big event a year, it's going to be my full distance triathlon. And if I'm going to do that, I am going to throw the kitchen sink at it. And I want it to be this sort of big, massive event sort of thing. I don't want to go to Cambridgeshire to do it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. But, that's, like you just said, it's horses for courses, isn't it? It's fair enough. I guess there's a market for yours, though, because for anybody who wants to dip the toe in the water at a longer distance event and don't want to spend all that money because they might not enjoy it,
Yeah. Well, what we found, we run it, yet again, what we've done is to make it viable as an event, we run it alongside a 12-hour running event as well.
Yeah.
So there's a 12-hour enduro run, if you want to call it that runs 10:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night. Yeah. Right. The iron distance race starts 6:30 in the morning. So when you come back from the bike, although we've not got massive numbers, you haven't got the thousands of people taking part like you have at the big major races, you have got other people on the run course. So you're not just out there on your own. And the run lap is a 7K lap. So when you're out there doing your 6 laps or whatever, each lap you're coming back through basically a party area. So we have a bar there and entertainment and everything. And we tried to make it more of a, your Ironman branding and everything is all very sort of hardcore and serious and sort of like, dramatic music. What we've tried to do is focus more on let's have a good time.
Yeah.
Sort of
make
thing.
It fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do it with a smile on your face sort of thing. And, just enjoy it. Enjoy the experience. It's a long day out, guys, sort of thing, enjoy yourself.
Brilliant.
So, we try to sort of go in with a bit of a different approach sort of thing. And hopefully people will buy into that.
Cool. Well, I hope it goes well.
Thank you.
I hope you go from strength to strength. I'm trying to remember if I've done any of your events. I should have had a look before I come on the podcast, to be fair. I can't remember if I have or I haven't. But I'll look out for them now, that's for sure.
Very good. Well, we do about 40 a year, so we do a fair few.
Plenty to choose from, isn't there?
There certainly is.
Excellent. Have you got anything more that you'd like to add?
No. I think I'm good actually. Just want to say, thanks for having me on board. sort of thing. And I think it's a great little podcast you got going here. So thanks for that.
Thank you very much. Just got a few quick fire questions, and then
Well,
we'll wrap it up. And the first one is, what's your favourite bit of kit when you were racing? And I know you're not at the moment, but what's your favourite bit of kit?
You know what? Back in the day, we used to use these things called the special pedals, pyro pedals.
Right.
And basically what it did was it transformed your trainers into a bike shoe. So basically you're running your trainers and you didn't have to take your trainers off in transition. You just picked up your bike, ran out, and then you clipped your trainers into these pyro pedals, and it made the bottom of your trainers stiff. So it turned them into a bike shoe. And I actually used to love these things. I used to do bike races in them and annoy the hell out of the cyclists, because I'd be riding along with trainers on in the middle of a pack, sort of thing. They'd be looking down at my wheels, like my pedals, going, why are you wearing trainers?
Yeah. And
and I'd be like, well, in a minute, I'm going to get off and go for a run. That's why.
Yeah. Did you find that you lost any power in that?
You lose a little bit of power, but compared to how much you saved in terms of time, I reckon you'd save a good 10 seconds, which in an elite race where it's all about getting on the back of a pack, and sort of like making that pack or not making that pack can be a huge difference. So,
I'll tell you a little story about that, because my wife was racing over in Portugal at the European Championship duathlons this year, and Mario Mola was racing in the elites. Wasn't a massive field, but it was a draft legal race, and we were watching them. She'd already raced, and we were watching them. They were the last to go, and I think probably 90% of the athletes there were biking in the trainers, exactly what you've said. And then to add to that, one of my teammates, and Mark Saggers, who's actually been on the podcast, he's got a YouTube channel as well, he lost potentially a bronze medal because the three guys that he was with were all wearing trainers, and he lost 15 seconds to them in transition. So that's, you talking about it then, now, it's still a thing. We have then sat down and thought about it, and Mark's actually gone off and he's researched it, and he's put some pedals together to give him that sort of advantage. But I think in a draft legal race, it would. Yeah. I think it's a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Well, check out pyro platforms. They're a bit old school sort of thing, but yeah, they had them back in the day sort of thing. You don't see them so much now. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe it's because there's not that. Let's be honest, there's not that much draft legal racing going on, is there? Sort of thing. I
think from an age group point of view, all of the sprint stuff's still draft legal. So,
it's starting to get there. They have a few. Normally, they have a couple, don't they? Sort of thing. In the international scene, it is. On the continent,
in the international scene, a lot of these questions I would normally ask, because you're not trained at the moment. It's not they're not really relevant. But what's the best tip that you ever received for your athletic career?
Ooh, that's a good question. So, I would say that thing about the consistency. Don't worry too much about the quality of the session that you're putting in. It's just about putting the sessions in. When you're tired and you've come home from work and it's raining outside and you've had a bit of a rough day and you're tired, don't worry about the fact that your session might not be great, but get that session done. Put your trainers on, put your kit on, get out the door. And actually, in 20 minutes plus, you're probably going to feel good anyway. But it doesn't really matter anyway. Even if you come back, just get that session done. It's another one in the bag. And tomorrow, you'll have a better session for it. So get out there and do it.
Great advice. And last question is, what are your short and your long-term goals, personally?
Ooh, okay. So short-term goals, I would say, are... For me, physically, sort of thing. I've got sort of like I quite like doing my cycling and stuff still, so I do quite a bit of Zwifting nowadays. So I think it's very time efficient sort of thing for me to sort of like come home and get some sessions done. So I want to get myself fit again for the winter. Try and not put on quite as much weight as I normally do over the Christmas period, and I'd struggle to get rid of it all summer. So definitely want to sort of like get myself fit, keep fitter, and stop this sort of yo-yoing between sort of summer season, we work so hard, sort of thing on the events. Literally, we have an event every single weekend.
Yeah.
So it's, Friday, Saturday setting up, Sunday delivering, Monday recovering, let's be honest, sort of thing, from having hardly had any sleep all weekend. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, getting ready for the next weekend again. So it's sort of I'd like to try and get out of that cycle a little bit, where in the summer I end up getting quite unfit from a physical point of view, and then spend the winter getting fit again, sort of thing, and try and be a bit more consistent with my health, shall we say?
Yeah. And longer term,
long term, I think I'm going to put on my ATW hat on, and just say that I'd like to see ATW continuing to sort of like grow and sort of putting on events that the age groupers out there want to do. And I'd love for people to sort of like be going, oh yeah, we love coming to your events, sort of thing. We do get that all the time. People saying, oh, we love coming to your events. But when that calendar comes out, being able to sort of go, yeah, we're putting on events that you guys want and that you guys can turn up to and go, I can't wait for that ATW event that we're going to, whether it's, a different sort of format. Some of the stuff we do with the Super Series now for British Triathlon, we're doing these eliminator formats and things, right, and triple mixers and things.
Yeah.
I'd love to see some of that sort of like being rolled out across the age groupers and to get them an opportunity to sort of like really mess around with it a little bit and be competitive in a more exciting format, a bit like Super League, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So just another question off the back of that. Where do you see triathlon going in, like professional triathlon going, which then filters down usually in the long run? Because obviously now we've got, you've always had Ironman, and we in this country we've got Outlaw, and you've got now the T100, and Ironman have done a similar sort of series. You've got the World Triathlon Organization, which does the Olympic and the sprint distances. And now you've got Super League as well, which have been successful over the last 5 years. Where do you see it going? Which direction, if any?
So I think, this is only my personal opinion for what I've heard other people saying, is that I think Super League have made a bit of a mess of it, personally. I think they had a massive opportunity. They came in with this fresh idea. No one was doing short stuff like they do. Mm-hmm. And they came in with this really, really cool idea. And it was absolutely brilliant, sort of thing, when they launched it. And I think they've overcomplicated it and made it too confusing for the general public to understand. That I know the athletes hate the whole short shoot thing.
Yeah.
I heard. Yeah. Because it totally and utterly messes up the race, sort of thing. So they brought in this concept of the short shoot, and it's like good for spectators because you've got this race to be able to win your short shoots and stuff.
Yeah.
But if you're an athlete taking part in it, you're having a race, and all of a sudden one of your competitors just does 50 yards less than you. What the hell's that about? Sort of thing. So I don't think the athletes really like it, and I don't think the general public really understand it. Sort of thing. It's like they've made. I think they've helped this year because this year they've stuck to the enduro format, haven't they?
Yes. Yeah.
So I wonder if that is a bit of a reflection of the fact that people were just getting too confused with all the different formats. So they've gone, okay, let's stick with one format and we'll just keep playing that one over.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Because each series last year and before, you were like wondering which ones it was going to be. And it is a lot easier to watch, I think, with it being the same format.
And we're all into triathlon. We're hardcore triathletes watching it. If I sit down, my sister, say, sort of thing, is not into triathlon whatsoever, or my family, and go, hey guys, watch this sort of thing, they'll be like, what's going on? I don't get it.
I don't understand it.
No, it's hard enough anyway trying to explain triathlon to non-triathletes, sort of thing, and watching the Olympics with Alex Yee and that kind of stuff, sort of thing. People have sort of got that now. They sort of understand that. But I think the complexity that Super League were bringing in just maybe killed it off a bit.
Yeah.
So I think they've got an opportunity still to sort of make it work, but I think they've got to simplify it a little bit, and make that work. T100, interesting, we got invited down to the launch of the T100 down in Canary Wharf when they launched it.
Mm-hmm.
And their chairman stood up and gave a really, really good talk, actually, about what the T100 was about and why they were launching it. And he's come from, he's an event marketing guy.
Yes.
Their chairman is. and he's come from a tennis background. He basically launched the indoor tennis thing at the O2. And apparently back then, when he launched that, they were like, oh, it won't work. It's not in, it's not Flushing Meadows. It's not Wimbledon. No one's going to be interested. And obviously that's become apparently one of the fastest parts of the sport, one of the largest parts of the sport now, these indoor tennis competitions. And he basically was saying, because he's not a triathlete, he's looking at this purely with a marketing hat on and saying, well, what are people interested in? So he watched, some Ironman coverage or whatever. And he was saying, it's all right, but it's bloody boring. It's like, to me, I'm not interested, in watching. It's too long. Yeah. So they've made it shorter. That ticks the box. Yeah. That makes sense. He also said, and I totally agree with him in this as well, that you need to care about the athletes who are competing. And I have this problem with, you were talking about the Diamond League, watching the Diamond League the other day. I've had this for a few years now with the Diamond League. When you're watching the distance running sort of thing, it's a bunch of let's face it, Africans running normally sort of thing, a bunch of Africans all wearing the same vest sort of thing, running around in circles. And it's like, I'm an athlete, but I don't really care which one of them wins sort of thing. I'm impressed by the speed they're running at sort of thing. I get it, but I want to have a bit of skin in the game sort of thing. I'd rather go down to Watford and watch a British Milers Club race down there with some local athletes who I care about, and be supporting my local club down there and watching them take part in an 800 meter race, because actually I care about the result. So he was saying, for these triathletes, who are they? We need to learn and understand and care about who they are. So we need to make them almost like celebrities, so people, you've got the good guy and the bad guy type thing, So that was the idea behind only having 20 in each race, was making it a smaller field. Yeah. And so they could get you to know the athletes. I don't really feel like that's worked. Yeah. So maybe a bit of a sort of like 5 out of 10 on that, I think, for the way they've done that.
I think the problem with that one is they're not getting the same athletes at all at the race, are they? They're bringing wild cards in because the athletes, there's so much choice now for athletes. They can go and pick and choose and do other stuff. They haven't tied them down to say, well, you've signed on for 20 races, you've got to do that. I was listening to Triathlon Hour show. He had the CEO of that T100 on, and he held his hand up and he said, we're a new format. It's going to take time. We haven't got probably 50% right yet, and it's developing, as you well know. In these things, it takes time to develop.
Yeah. And the final thing he said, which I think is really good, is what they haven't got right yet, is providing the data on the screen when you're watching the race. So he said, if you watch Formula One or whatever, you get all the data,
Tour de France, they have it.
Yeah.
A lot of data on that for a fan like me who likes to watch loads of cycling. It's on there, and it's getting better and better as well as you watch each year. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if they could actually have something, there's not that many of them. There's only 20 of them. Yeah. I don't understand why they can't actually fit a telemetric box to everybody with a camera installed in it as well. So actually they know how many watts they're putting out, what's the heart rate, what percentage of their FTP are they working at, sort of thing. So they'll have all that data. Yeah. And then equally having onboard footage, just like you get in the velodrome. If everyone's got a camera mounted underneath their saddle or on their frame somewhere, you make it a requirement that everyone has to have that. You're then going to get some great footage actually from inside the race. Yeah. Because the other bit that has really let them down, I think, is the actual video content that's coming out from the race. I mean, the first one was awful. It was just a bunch of dots in the distance going around the track, wasn't it? He
did say that they won't be going back there. That was awful.
Yeah.
But again,
the irony was that when you watched the coverage, it showed like the people from a distance, the cyclists from a distance, sort of like going around the track, and it made it look like it was a bit of a, boring circuit. And then I saw some photos. Alistair Brownlee was in that one, wasn't he? Of Alistair Brownlee going around a corner on his tri-bars at about 45 degrees around one of the technical elements of the course. And you thought, wow, if you'd have actually been able to see that on the TV coverage and show the angles these guys are pulling around the corners and stuff, those of us who are really into the sport would have been mind blown. Like, how the heck is he getting around them corners at that speed, pulling those angles? That's, really impressive. Yeah. But as a result, it totally, debunked all that and sort of like didn't show any of that at all, which is a real shame. Yeah. But I do think the T100 has got a place. And I think the T100 is going to be successful if they can iron out all these things and develop them, because it is bringing in your, World Triathlon Series racers and providing them with an alternative for them, especially when they're getting slightly later in their career, but they don't want to go to Ironman. Yeah. Because, you talk to a lot of the sprint distance athletes, sort of sprint and standard distance, they've got no aspiration to do, sort of full Ironman distance racing. But the T100, I think, and you saw it with Sophie Coldwell and Jess Lermoth, it's an opportunity for them to just go, actually, I could do that without too much training. I could tweak it a little bit, get my time trial bike out, do a bit more on my time trial bike, but I can be competitive here.
Yeah. And they're already well-known names as well, aren't they? Which will help T100.
Hugely. You get Georgia Taylor Brown and, sort of like people like that doing it, sort of thing. Everyone's going to be all over it, aren't they? Because they already know them. And they'll be looking for that opportunity. I can remember years ago when I was with the Tri Trust saying, the day that Alistair and Johnny Brownlee go head to head with Gomez in an Ironman race will be amazing, won't it? And I didn't go down too well with British Triathlon because obviously taking it out of their sphere. But I was saying, I could imagine, back then when they were all going, every race, it was Mola, Gomez, and the two Brownleys at the front. It was like, wow, imagine those guys going head to head in a non-drafting format sort of thing. That would be something you'd want to watch. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely seeing those developments, I think, come along. And I think hopefully it will all cascade, as you say, down in. Interestingly, we've had at ATW, we hold a 100K triathlon. We've been doing it for years, called the Centurion. Oh, yeah. And I think it's a really accessible. It's that great distance between sort of an Olympic distance and a half Ironman distance, 70.3. Yeah. It makes the swim a little bit longer, sort of thing. It's a little bit shorter on the bike and a little bit shorter on the run. Yeah. But if you're training for 70.3, doing the 100K distance is actually perfect stepping stone along the way for like an early season triathlon. So. Yeah,
brilliant, excellent. Well, we could talk all day, I think, about this, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to let you go.
That's all right.
It's been fascinating to hear your story and meet you and listen to what you've done with the Triathlon Trust and now with ATW. So good luck with ATW. Hope you go from strength to strength. And thank you once again for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Well, thanks again, Mike. Really enjoyed that chat. Can't believe that we were at it for 2 hours. Longest podcast I've ever done, I think. But fascinating story. And really will be interesting to see if you get back racing and also to see how ATW develops. And I'm definitely going to look out some of your events. So thank you once again. And that'll be it. That's a wrap. And I'm not going to take any more of your time up. Thank you once again for listening. If you'd like to get in touch and maybe share your story on the podcast, you can send us an email at agegroupmultisportpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can find us on Instagram at amp_1967. We are on Facebook at ampgb. We're on X at Age Group Multisport Podcast. And we have our own YouTube channel, which has got loads of videos on there from various athletes. And also all the other podcasts are there too. And that is also ampgb. Until next time, stay safe, keep training, and love the process.